Hey Mike, here's a book. Can you tell us anything about this particular book?
Yeah, this is a very good book in my estimation. It was written by Tom Powell. Tom Powell is a school teacher. Um, from what I understand, when he prior to the writing of this book, he had been using the Bigfoot phenomena as a subject to use in school, in middle schools, where he taught, to teach the idea of the scientific method. And at the time that he was doing this, he was pretty much a skeptic and didn't really think that Bigfoot was anything real. Um, and so what he would show in the course of doing this class was that the scientific method, when applied to Bigfoot, cannot prove that it exists. Well, you can't prove it doesn't either, of course, because you can't really prove something doesn't exist. But he happened to go, from what I understand, and had a personal meeting with Grover Krantz. So Grover Krantz, of course, was the first scientist to be really well known as believing in the reality of Bigfoot, and the first scientist to really put his neck on the line studying it and writing about it. And when he met with Krantz and heard some of what Krantz had to say, he decided to take a little different attitude and suspend his disbelief for a while. And he got involved with the BFRO, the Bigfoot Field Research Organization, and he did some field work with them, and he started working as an investigator for them, which meant that he would have access to these Bigfoot stories, that people would contact the BFRO and let them know that they'd seen a Bigfoot or experienced one. And then Powell was one of the people who would go out and interview the witnesses. And during the course of doing that, he made a bunch of contacts with eyewitnesses, and over the course of time became less and less skeptical about it. And at this point in time, he's definitely amongst those of us who believe that it's much more likely and logical that Bigfoot does exist than it doesn't. And I especially like his book because this really ties into what we've discovered here in the Santa Cruz area. He calls the book The Locals, and what he means by that is that Bigfoot apparently are not limited to just gigantic national forests way up in the northern territories, or that they actually can coexist right on the edge of towns in suburban areas where there are neighborhoods of people living their daily lives. There can be Bigfoot in these areas, in forests right up against housing tracts, this sort of thing. And so those Bigfoot that are in your backyard and what have you, he refers to as the locals. Now, we discovered here in our 5 years of research in Santa Cruz that we have our locals. And so that's one of the reasons I relate heavily to this book. And this is one of the few Bigfoot books that I was compelled to read more than once because of the material that was in it and the value I was gaining from it. And what I like about it is that Tom wasn't afraid to tackle some of the more touchy subjects in the Bigfoot phenomena. You find, if you study this long enough, that the Bigfoot phenomenon is very, very widespread, and it's very diverse in its characteristics. And as I tell people almost every day here in the museum, there is no one answer to the Bigfoot phenomenon. There is no one solution to the Bigfoot mystery. We have here a bunch of things that are going on which people refer to under the rubric of Bigfoot. In other words, somebody goes out in the woods and they see something that looks to be a bipedal, hair-covered primate of some sort. And they would refer to it then as Bigfoot, because Bigfoot is the term that's caught on. Or they might call it a Sasquatch or whatever. Anyway, the point is that they're having a particular experience which could be the result of any of several dozen possible hypotheses in terms of an explanation. Somebody sees a Bigfoot, why did they see it? And the biggest question would be to the academic community, if they don't exist, why did you see it? So then there's all these solutions and these possible hypotheses explain it. It was his imagination. It was a guy in a suit. it was somebody perpetrating a hoax. It was a misidentified animal. He really saw the tail end of a moose and couldn't tell the difference. And on and on and on. Then there are people who will say, well, the Bigfoot is paranormal. It can talk to people telepathically. It can read your minds. That's why it's so hard for you to find them. And if they want to, they can just instantly disappear by passing into another dimension. This sort of thing comes up too. People claim to have seen UFOs land and then shortly thereafter see hairy bipedal creatures carrying glowing orbs walking through the woods. There's stories I read out of Ohio years ago about of a Bigfoot that would leave radioactive tracks that actually glowed, the footprints glowed. And that people in the area suddenly started speaking in tongues and acting out like they were possessed. And there were these little aliens that would float through the... I mean, we're talking here stories that can go into all kinds of different realms. And Tom, in his book, at least speaks to all those various realms. And one of the most often shoved aside realms is the paranormal Bigfoot. Now, apparently some Bigfoot events, at least to the observer, appear to be paranormal. The Bigfoot is doing something that doesn't seem to follow the natural rules. There are also instances having to do with Bigfoot studies that seem to indicate that there might be some cover-ups involved. So conspiracies and cover-ups, this is another thing that generally you hear of largely associated with the UFO studies, and not so much with Bigfoot. But on the other hand, there are tales of potential cover-ups having to do with Bigfoot too. And what I like about Tom's book is he goes into even those more taboo subjects and at least touches on them to a degree. He doesn't necessarily explain them or even explain them away, but he makes you aware that it is part of the phenomenon. And I think that that's actually doing good science, because I don't think it's good science to just throw things out because you don't like the way they sound. And so even though it may be awfully difficult to prove there's a paranormal Bigfoot, apparently some people's experiences with Bigfoot come across as being paranormal. Now, that's what I mean. The Bigfoot phenomenon is very diverse. It's very widespread. It's no one simple thing. It's a lot of different stuff going on under the same rubric and under the same name. And Tom's book speaks to that nicely.